to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany, as well as the world's first internet radio station dedicated to startups and tech companies. Today, I bring you another interview with yet another guest. He's not the co-founder of a startup, but the CFO of Hamburg-based HAUSGOLD, which literally translates to House Gold. Welcome, Andreas. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for the invitation, Joe. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. People may see when they see it here on YouTube, short sleeve. So this is already recorded in the summer, but due to a little backlog of interviews, we're only going to publish this in fall, but nonetheless, we try to keep it as relevant as possible. I've been looking a little bit at your CV and a little bit into the Handelsregister, which is the public register of German companies, and I've seen you entered as CFO in the company officially in the public register in April 2021. And I've seen before that you've been an investment banker as well as a strategy consultant. Can you take us a little bit through the journey, what you did, what you learned, and how you ended up with a company founded 7 years before as a CFO?
Yeah, sure. So my pedigree, I think, is a relatively standard or orthodox pedigree. I studied finance and economics at a German-speaking business school in Vienna. I moved immediately after my studies. I joined a consulting firm for which I worked for more than 4 years, did a lot of quantitative analytical work there in a number of international locations. That I spent almost 2 years in Brazil, spent half a year in South Africa, had a basically a great time. But then I figured I still want to see another sector, moved into investment banking, joined one of the large investment banks in London and covered the financial institutions sector in Europe out of London. And I did that for almost 5 years. And I did like my job there, quite a lot. But what I missed was the entrepreneurial spirit. What the job lacked was what I frankly disliked was the time lag between having an idea and getting everybody on board to actually implement that idea into reality. And that is just something completely different at the place where I'm right now at HAUSGOLD, where if me and the founder and CEO, Sebastian Wagner, when we discuss an idea, we can virtually implement it if it's possible over the next couple of days, and basically run tests and see how the data works out. And this is something that I find extremely refreshing. It's so basically the impact that one can have as a single individual at a small institution, at a small startup, is just exponentially larger than just being a small fish in the pond of a global investment bank, for instance. So this is something that motivated me to move out of investment banking.
And I'm a little bit curious how you ended up at HAUSGOLD, how you decided for this startup. I assume you had a lot of offers at hand. And why did you choose this startup? Is it because it's very promising, because it has an innovative technology, or because you just got along very well with the CEO?
Frankly, you mentioned all the three most relevant aspects. So first of all, I hit it off with Sebastian very well initially. From the first meeting we had, I saw that there's a very good vibe to have a great working relationship with the founder, which is something extremely important. When I look at a job per se, I look, and when I try to do that rather agnostically, getting along with the employees and experiencing a great working atmosphere is something extremely important. I've seen how that investment banks are not necessarily known for having a great working atmosphere. I think they are being judged too harshly. The atmosphere can be great there as well, but it's something obviously motivating, especially at a startup where in particular, moving from an investment bank, the move isn't motivated necessarily by short-term financial considerations. So that's something extremely important. But also, I always had an affinity for the real estate sector per se. I did cover, as a banker and as a consultant, I was actually focused on fintechs, financial institutions, insurance firms, banks, etc. Which is somewhat adjacent to the real estate sector because financing is always a very critical element to any real estate or to most real estate transactions. But more importantly, as a private investor, I've been a very small scale investor in Viennese real estate, which is where I'm originally from. And so I always liked or found the sector interesting. And I always found the sector extremely, how am I going to put it? I always found it interesting that the part that a lot of elements of the real estate selling haven't really been disrupted, or disruption has started relatively late in the game. If you look at a real estate transaction, when you look at the angle, an agent selling a real estate, a property to a buyer, that has been disrupted a long time ago, 25 years ago, when big real estate portals like ImmoScout24 in Germany and equivalents in other countries have been built. That angle of the real estate transaction has been disrupted a long time ago. But the angle where a seller actually finds an agent he wants to work with and he wants to entrust with selling his or her property, that part of the business hadn't yet been fully disrupted. And I think disruption is still relatively early on in the game here. And so I found that very interesting. And then lastly, HAUSGOLD is a startup and is in a sector where data and big data is extremely important. Just to throw in a number here, we speak to over 100,000 customers each year. And that gives us a lot of data to learn from. And it was always my aspiration and what we had agreed on informally that I wasn't simply going to be a CFO who looks at the numbers and basically, and is involved in investor dialogues, etc. But that I want to be much more than that and actually really drive the business and our decision making as to where we want to allocate resources, where we want to allocate capital based on numbers and just help HAUSGOLD monetize the data that we have in a much more significant fashion.
Before we get into what HAUSGOLD currently is and what you guys are aspiring to do, can you just take us on a little journey? Because my understanding is you can basically buy and sell legally real estate just through an internet platform, but many people still rely on human brokers. Can you tell us a little bit what segment this is relevant for and your personal opinion why people are still doing it when they could do it all remote?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. This has been a thesis for the better part of 2 decades that the existence of real estate portals will basically vanish or result in the complete irrelevance of the job of an agent, and basically the agent will not be required anymore going forward. And that hypothesis has been existing for 25 years at this point. What you can see is that the percentage of real estate transactions that have been supported or enabled by a real estate agent has been relatively steady and relatively unchanged. So I think there's certain elements that a real estate agent can bring to the transaction and a certain value add that most sellers do appreciate. What we see on our platform as well is certain sellers try to sell it by themselves immediately or initially, and then choose to select an agent because they haven't been able to. So in essence, obviously the how you can assess whether an agent actually provides critical value is if he at least achieves a price that allows for his part of the provision to be paid out of hand. I think, and we, I speak to many of our agents on a weekly basis. There's a lot of elements that give the agent a better an advantage at selling a property vis-a-vis the actual seller or the owner of a property. The agent has time; it's his full-time job. He knows his job inside out. He also will be able to sell a property and present the property in a more neutral and sober fashion. There should be less emotions involved. And he knows what works and what hasn't worked, right? It's similar to a car salesman or to anyone who sells a product. You've been doing it for decades in many instances, and you know how certain, say, bad elements of a property can be preempted, can be renovated, what needs to be done, what will work with a certain pocket of buyers, and what won't work and what will detract interest. So I think there's a lot of elements that speak in favor of actually hiring an agent. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it in all situations, but the fact that the percentage of transactions in Germany and frankly across Europe has been relatively unchanged and is very steady in terms of who uses an agent and who actually sells privately, shows me and is testament for our conviction that the agent is here to stay, and the agent actually plays a critical role in real estate selling.
Before we get into HAUSGOLD, I just want to add a little cultural background, because here in Germany, it's usually the case if you really at one point in your life settle to buy a house, to buy an apartment, usually it's your only purchase of real estate in your life. So most of people will settle for the only house they ever bought, and they won't change it a lot. So it's not only a big decision in terms of financial value, it's also a big decision in terms of how to spend your life. Because if you're looking for a really remote place, you also have to consider that you live there at old age when you are not able to drive your car anymore and stuff like this. So that are all considerations that go into it. That's why I do believe Germans look a little bit longer for real estate than Americans, because if you're an American, you change several times your location, and basically you always have in the back of your mind, oh, if I don't like this house, I can sell it and can move another place. Germans are a little bit different here, just for the cultural background. My understanding is now for HAUSGOLD, you guys been founded 2014 in Hamburg, where you're still located. You have around 60 employees, a little bit more when we talked about before. And basically your thing is you have real estate brokers or agents that you connect with people who want to sell houses. So basically not rental properties is your thing, not apartments, but basically houses. That is what you're focused on. And I've seen a very interesting list of investors, including the Global Founders Fund backed by Rocket Internet, the big Deutsche Bank. People from abroad may not know it, but the founder of Scout24, it was like the first platforms, the first digitalization platforms that been built here in Germany, as well as Hansa Ventures, where you guys been incubated, I do believe. And so far you raised around 11 million euros from my understanding, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's correct. I also found an article that you guys are looking for another 12 million Series B investment. But when we talked about the article before, you said, that's not completely correct.
No, this wasn't reported accurately. In fact, we're not in a fundraising stage at this point. What we've seen is this year has been, I'd call it spectacular in terms of our finances. We've seen that our cash burn is close to zero. Whilst we grow, we're going to be growing roughly 100% this year. So things are working out great. We want to grow more, and we want to improve our financial situation even more. We want to improve our unit economics, and then, potentially tap the capital market at some point over the next, say, 12 to 24 months. But really, it's not. I'm never a friend of raising capital purely for the sake of raising capital. If there is an opportunity how we can deploy the capital in a smart and in a value accretive manner, then we will do so. If we raising capital purely for say, for throwing money at marketing or at the expense of diluting our current shareholder base is not the way we want to operate.
Talking about this, so basically I have two questions because I found an interview of your CFO, Sebastian, back in 2020. He talked about, that was in April 2020. So when Corona was just getting traction here in Germany, and he talked about for 2020, the aim of 100% growth plus break even. Did you guys achieve that?
Yes. So we achieved break even in that year. And basically, we're right now not running at break even, but at a relatively de minimis cash burn. Why is it tricky in our business sometimes to break even is because of the following reasons. Why, right? We invest in marketing, in basically acquiring customer contacts that want to sell their property right now, and will only generate the revenues over the next couple of months. So basically, because of that time lag, when you scale quickly, it's oftentimes difficult to fully break even or to be strongly operationally profitable. What we've seen in 2020, and which was at a time when I wasn't yet at HAUSGOLD, but when I was already in touch with Sebastian, what HAUSGOLD did is we slashed the growth a little, purely to see how Corona will evolve and how it's actually going to impact the housing market. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, it was a boost to real estate prices and actually also to the number of transactions. So it turned out to be relatively beneficial to prices. But yeah, we've slashed our marketing expenses for a couple of months. And once you do that, it's tricky to recover that revenue over time. So we didn't grow at 100%, but we grew slightly less than that.
And basically you guys are working with something like 4,000 real estate brokers. Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit what the people that are entering your platform are looking like? Because it's like usually people that are retired, or are they very young and inherited houses? Are they very cheap ones? Are they very expensive ones? What is usually your clientele, your customer base?
It depends on what you define as customer. I define customer as both the sellers, the potential property sellers on the one hand, and obviously the agents as well. Agents, I view them as customers, but also as partners, because if the agent is successful, HAUSGOLD is successful, and, conversely, if they don't end up selling a property, then also HAUSGOLD stands to not book revenues accordingly. So basically, there's a beautiful alignment in terms of the interest of the agent and HAUSGOLD per se, which I think works very well. Maybe quickly coming to your question, right? Or let me maybe take a step back first. What we try to solve, and where I think there's a real market failure at this point, is we try to bring transparency to the agent landscape. If you are a property seller right now in Germany or elsewhere, it's very hard to differentiate for you who is a good seller and who is actually, or who is a strong performing agent and who is actually a mediocre one. And, in many life decisions, this may not be as important, but actually for many of our property sellers, for many of the people who come across our platform, in order to look for an agent, it's the single most important financial transaction of their life. We've run several surveys. A large majority of the net worth of the average seller in Germany is captured in this one property. So it is very critical that you decide on selecting the right agent. And if you look at it and if you speak to friends and colleagues, etc., the process of selecting an agent is actually very erratic in most circumstances. It's driven by considerations about brand, gut feeling, maybe word of mouth. A friend may have recommended an agent that potentially is even a top performing agent for a certain segment. Let's say, properties in the price range of 200,000. He may not be the perfect agent to sell a mansion, in a suburban region in Berlin or Hamburg that's worth maybe 7 digits. So even if you are a good agent for one specific property, that may not necessarily apply to other properties. So what we try to do here is, we want to bring analytics to the question of which agent to choose. And we want to help the seller who basically struggles. Who struggles to differentiate between good ones and mediocre agents. And we say, we will look at all the data that we have of our, more than 4,000 agents on our platform. We know the historical data. We know how successful they have been at selling real estate in certain segments, in certain price points, in certain locations. We know how good they were at, say, estimating the value of a property and how that initial estimate compared with the ultimate sales price. So we have a lot of internal and a lot of external data to assess who will be the best suited agents, or who will be among the best suited agents for a certain property. So that's the value proposition that we give to a seller. And what we also do, and I think this is a great value add, we tell a property seller that he can get up to 3 valuation estimates for free. So he gets to meet 3 agents, and he can see, and he can decide for himself who he thinks is most legitimate, who he thinks is most competent, and who he wants to work with. And maybe also, where there is a level of, call it sympathy or just getting along well with an agent, which is also obviously critical from a personal standpoint. So he gets to, I compare it with, say you have an unfortunate medical diagnosis. You also want to get a second opinion and a third opinion. And in such a case, we enable, given it's such an important lifetime decision for a seller, we say, speak to more than one agent. Speak to various agents, develop some comfort, and then you get to pick among already pre-selected agents that our algorithm, that our technology basically has selected based on your property characteristics, your preferences, the seller's preferences basically, and the competencies and success factors that we have of our agent base. So that's something, I think that's the value add that we bring to the seller. And to the agent, it's something, similar in terms of market failure. What you see is, or let's put it that way, why does the seller struggle to differentiate between a good and a bad agent? Because it's very hard to see it outside in, to see it a priori whether an agent is good or bad. You will usually find out over the course of the process of selling a real estate, but usually you'll find out way too late in the game. And similarly for an agent, it's tricky to differentiate himself from the crowd. You may be a very ambitious and hardworking and just competent agent, but everybody else uses the same slogans. They will all promise you they're going to sell your real estate quicker and for a higher price. It's extremely hard to differentiate. You can try it via brand, and that's a very expensive way to differentiate. And other than that, it's hard to get rewarded for performance. You may get rewarded by a word of mouth, and that's pretty much it. Google reviews are very tricky. They're full with fake reviews. I would call them almost useless. So if you want to have a platform where performance will be rewarded, HAUSGOLD is a great platform to work with, because we will, not only will a strong agent get more seller contact details, but he'll also get, on our platform, he'll get specific, tailored, contact details where our algorithm already thinks that he will be the best suited agent to actually perform well, aka to convert a seller's lead to an actual sale. So that's also the value add that we give to agents. On the flip side, of course, what we do have is, I'd call it an adverse selection in terms of the agents. What you see is if you're strong performing, you're going to perform well on our platform and you're going to get plenty of sellers contacts. If you perform poorly, you're going to get a couple of chances to prove your performance, but at some point, a certain natural selection applies and you're not going to get any more contact details because our algorithm, our technology will not regard you as good enough to work with our sellers.
One question, when you talked about fake reviews, did you also already see some attempts on your website to post fake reviews, fake transactions?
I'm not sure. What do you mean with fake transactions?
Basically, a real estate broker asks a friend, go on the platform, select me, give me a good review.
Not really. We don't work with reviews. We work with reviews whenever a seller has performed the valuation, and whenever an agent has performed the valuation, and whenever an agent has actually ended up selling a property. That's when our call center speaks to the seller and asks a couple of critical questions that will allow us to look at the performance. What we primarily look at is the hard data. Basically, with how many customers have you spoken? How many did you convert into a broker contract, and how many of those broker contracts do you convert towards a sale? And how does that look across? How do those numbers look across, certain segments in terms of price point expertise of a certain property, in terms of certain locations, and so on and so forth. And we also look at a lot of external data that we try to enrich our decision-making process. We do also include, say, the review element, but frankly, to a very minor piece, because I'm cognizant of the fact that there's a good element of fake in it. If you look at, and it's hard to distinguish, if you look at a platform at the big real estate portals, you're never going to see really bad reviews. It's usually, in 90% of the cases, that would be my guess, either you get a review, an average review of 4.8 or be it 4.6, but it's very tough to interpret that data. And I think it's very noisy data. So we refrain from looking at it in too much depth.
I see. I actually like it when an interview guest makes up so much of the interview. That's really good. Let us get towards the end, and I just have a few more shorter questions for you. We've been already talking about how Corona did impact you, so it was positive. You didn't have to send any employees to short-term employment options like Kurzarbeit?
Not really. We kept on working. It's easy for us because how we differentiate from other proptechs in a similar field is we don't employ the agents on our platform. So basically that makes us extremely lean from a capital efficiency standpoint, makes us extremely lean from a cost run rate standpoint. So nobody was put on furlough. What we did do is slash our marketing expenses. We readjusted a little our product development pipeline, etc. But other than that, we didn't put anyone on furlough. What we did struggle with, and frankly, I've seen it when I joined in late last year, is obviously with the question of working remotely. I think it's a great thing. I think it's also something where, as a startup, we compete with for talent with a lot of other firms. And as a startup, or as many startups, we're usually not in a position to potentially pay the best salaries, but we want to accommodate our employees by giving them a lot of flexibility in terms of choosing where they want to work from, and giving them a lot of flexibility in that regard. So I think the coronavirus or the pandemic that started in spring 2020, I think in that regard it will have a lasting impact on I think many companies, and including HAUSGOLD. So we've working remotely was something relatively unorthodox before the pandemic at HAUSGOLD, and now it's something relatively standard. But I still think it's important to have a certain office atmosphere, and certain dialogues, certain informal dialogues where you actually do create the ideas that will drive a business. It's just easier for those things to happen in an informal manner in an office than when you actually speak with a colleague on a video call, in my point of view.
Mm-hmm. And one more question. Where do you see HAUSGOLD in the next 2 to 3 years, especially including the corona effect, meaning, as you said, working remotely, doing more from home, replacing real world interaction with digital ones, so people can move out further from the city centers and buy larger houses there. How do you see stuff like this impacting HAUSGOLD in the next few years, and where do you see the company in like the next 24 to 36 months?
I think it's an excellent question. I think what we currently already see in our data is a certain trend of de-urbanization. Meaning that many people, given the element of working remotely, is becoming more commonplace in German. For German employers, many people are using that as an opportunity to actually acquire properties outside of large urban centers. So we see that, and it's something that we actually benefit from strongly, because we have, not only do we work with many of the largest, nationwide operating real estate agents, but we also work with over 4,000 of the small local agents, and those are oftentimes excellent agents. Those are the real entrepreneurs that understand the market better than anyone. They wouldn't be willing to work for an employer, but they want to actually have their own business. They want to be their own boss, and they do an excellent job. And they see in many instances now increased activity also on our platform when it comes to property transactions, sort of in areas outside of the large urban centers. So I think it remains to be seen whether this trend actually continues over time. It's always hard to predict the future in that regard. But I think what we will see, generally speaking, is potentially higher prices and more property transactions driven by the devaluation spike over the last couple of years. We see a lot of sellers on our platform that basically don't necessarily want to sell their property because of a life-changing event. Say you inherited a property, or you want to move elsewhere, but that basically have a second property, and they want to actually make use of the current climate in terms of cheap financing that keeps prices up or it keeps them rising, and the inflationary implications of the monetary politics since the coronavirus. So I think as long as this trend continues, HAUSGOLD, and I think many PropTechs in Germany will do well. But ultimately, I think we need to do well regardless of the economic backdrop and regardless of whether real estate prices continue to inflate or actually may see a deflationary period, as many people in the market are saying. I think as long as we connect and keep on connecting and keep on improving in that regard, on connecting the seller with the best suited agents, we do a great service. We provide a great service not only to the seller, as long as we continue doing that, because he will get an agent that will get him a better price, will be able to sell the property in a short period of time vis-a-vis others, and he will not get an agent who say who will overpromise initially and then underdeliver, which is something extremely disappointing for sellers. But he will get somebody who will speak to him eye to eye and will continue on his promises and actually do a good job. And similarly for the agent, I think as long as we keep on giving agents the right customer contacts, that they will convert to a sale with a much higher likelihood than on other platforms and with other, say, competitors of ours. We have not only a raison d'être to exist, but we will also do well and provide a great service to both our customers or partners, which I consider to be the sellers on the one hand and the agents on the other.
Great. Well, basically, you always give me extensive answers, and there's not a lot I have to ask. So only thing left for me to say is thank you very much. It was a great pleasure having you as a guest here, and best of luck for HAUSGOLD, and let us know if there's an update.
I will. Appreciate the conversation, and thanks for the invite, Joe.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That's all, folks. Find more news